Hello, and thank you so much for joining us on At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson. For those of you who are expecting to see a conversation about education in Central Illinois, we're going to postpone that to another date because we have an opportunity to fit Congressman Aaron Schock into our schedule. And let me introduce you to Congressman Aaron Schock, Republican from Peoria, representing the 18th Congressional District. Thank you for being with us.
Good to be with you, H. Thanks for having me on.
I know it's difficult with your schedule. We were just talking it before we just taped this program, but that your schedule is just hither and yon, and we appreciate your taking a moment to talk to us.
My pleasure.
Let's start, last week, the State of the Union address. Let's start with some of the things that the President said. Prior to his speech, you said you wanted to hear specifics about jobs. Did the President deliver specifics on jobs to your satisfaction?
Well, I think he restated his goals, and what I think is important are the details of how we're going to get to those goals. He talked about the need for more energy independence. He said he would support more oil and natural gas drilling. Obviously, some of us are having difficulty with that goal now that Keystone appears to be killed. And so that would have been a huge boon for the not only the construction industry, but also the energy sectors. He talked about the need for infrastructure improvements. I'm a big proponent of getting a highway bill passed. That would create a lot of jobs. He's talked about the need for tax reform last week, and that's something that I can support. Again, would create jobs, make America more competitive. So, I think State of the Unions tend to be more of a lofty rhetoric speech as opposed to really laying out specific plans, but we're going to be able to see over the next year whether or not we get those plans from the White House. Certainly the House of Representatives will be producing its own set of plans on the budget, on tax reform, and on job bills. But I thought the President gave a good speech.
You've mentioned quite a few things in your answer. Let's tackle some of those individually. And just for reference, the reference to Keystone was the pipeline coming from Canada down into America, not Keystone in Bartonville.
That's right, Keystone Pipeline.
Regarding the pipeline, right now there's some trading going on in D.C. The President isn't looking favorably upon the Keystone Pipeline. Is there any hope that that might happen?
Well, John Boehner, the Speaker, has been adamant that we're going to do everything we can to get Keystone approved. It's been studied for just over 3 years to make sure that it met all of its environmental requirements, which it did. The President then moved the decision away from the EPA and gave it to the State Department, arguing that there were some national security implications that need to be studied further. Many of us thought that was just stalemating and just dragging the decision on longer for political reasons. And it's why we asked for a 2-month timeline. Make a decision quick. And unfortunately right now the President appears to have said, well, if that's the case, we're not going to approve it. John Boehner has said, let's attach it to the unemployment benefits and the payroll tax extension, which will be approved in February. As you know, we passed a 2-month extension right before the Christmas break, but that 2 months is not long enough. We need to give the American citizens at least a year's certainty that their payroll taxes are not going to go up and that unemployment benefits are not going to run out over the next year. I expect that will pass in February. The Speaker has said it will, and he's talking about adding the Keystone Pipeline to that once again so that the President, in signing the unemployment benefits and payroll tax extension, would also approve the pipeline in the process. I can imagine it's going to be a bitter fight, though, because the President seems pretty insistent that it's not going to happen.
Let's stay on the issue of oil, a couple of issues. One is you've been up to Williston, North Dakota.
Yes.
That's where the fracking takes place to get the oil out of shale, much as they do in Canada. The U.S. EPA recently came out with a statement that said that it's possible that the water and gases and sand that is used in the fracking material to break the shale open might be causing pollution or leading to pollution in groundwater. Are you concerned? Have you changed your position on fracking and the use of getting oil out of shale?
Well, I haven't changed my position. I think any new study or new information the EPA might be able to produce that's solid evidence would cause anyone to take a second look. However, I have looked at the studies that have been done on fracking for over 30 years, several decades, and all of them have been conclusive in saying there's no cause effect of fracking to groundwater contamination. The communities who have claimed that that's the case, that have had methane in their water, have in fact had that problem before the fracking began. So I don't think it's cause for anyone to get alarmed that we should somehow shut down the huge oil boom that's occurred in Williston, North Dakota. Having been up there, I will tell you, they're having problems that we wish we had. Not enough housing, not enough people to fill their jobs. It has really turned around that state's economy. Less than 3% unemployment in the entire state of North Dakota. Less than 1% unemployment in the town of Williston. So energy is a huge opportunity for us to put Americans back to work and to keep money in our country as opposed to sending it to overseas governments.
Let's stay on the issue of the State of the Union address, because the president said that he would like to end the subsidies, I believe that was his term, end the subsidies to the oil industry. What subsidies are we talking about, and is that a good idea?
Boy, H, that's a question I've had asked by a lot of my constituents to me, because they've heard the president say this before. They've heard congressional leaders say, you know, these subsidies oil companies get. And so I thought, gee, why are we subsidizing oil companies? Well, as a matter of fact, oil companies don't receive any subsidies. That's the truth. The only thing that an oil company receives in terms of incentive is what we call a made in America provision, a manufacturing incentive that we give to companies just like Caterpillar. We give it to companies like Motorola or to Boeing. If they build their product here in the United States, we give them an added discount because they manufacture the product that they're selling here in the U.S. They made it in the U.S. And that applies to oil. It applies to anything that is produced, whether it be sand and gravel from a quarry or oil from one of the reserves. And the question, of course, is if you make it more expensive to produce oil here in the U.S., then you're basically incentivizing foreign oil production. So the only thing oil companies get is the same incentive production of their product, whether it be oil or natural gas or a Caterpillar tractor. But there is nothing special that we give to oil companies other than what we give to other companies that produce a good here in our country.
One more comment from the State of the Union address. The president said that he would like to see a 30% tax on people earning more than $1 million a year, across the board tax. Your take on whether that's a good idea or not?
Well, a couple thoughts. First, what he's proposing is a huge tax increase. And when Democrats controlled the House and the Senate for the first 2 years President Obama was in office, he attempted to raise taxes on several occasions. On every occasion, the Democrats in the House and the Senate rejected his proposals to raise taxes. Now Republicans control the House, Democrats control the Senate. I don't think he's going to get a tax increase passed. So his stated goal of increasing taxes, I think, is going to be a tough one for him. The specifics of his proposal of a 30% tax on all income of $1 million, I think is a tough one because, first of all, you're raising taxes in a down economy, which isn't a smart move. But number two, much of the income that's being taxed has already been taxed once. We call that investment income here in this country. And whether it's somebody who's saving for retirement, whether it's somebody who's saving for their business to hire more people, to raise the tax with no regard to where the money came from is really to take money away from small businesses and people that want to hire and grow their business. 75% of all companies in our country, 3 out of 4, are pass-through entities, subchapter S's, LLCs, people who file their income taxes at the personal level. So they're not big corporations. That's also where half of America gets their jobs. And so these are the people that are filing income statements that may have an income over $1 million a year, but they're not taking that money home to buy a fancy car or go on a fancy vacation. They're using it to buy a new piece of equipment. They're using it to hire more people. So again, the devil's in the details. The president's proposing in terms of raising taxes on those income filers. He's really talking about raising the taxes on small businesses, and I don't think that's a smart move.
Let's stay on the issue of taxes, because when you first ran in your first term, you had signed the pledge with Grover Norquist, no tax increases.
Yep.
We're facing a situation where the payroll deduction tax, some people refer to as Social Security, the 2% deduction, it's been extended for 2 months. You're looking for another 10 months added to that. And Mr. Norquist has said, well, that won't be an increase if you were to reinstate it. Where do you stand on tax increases as an individual congressperson, aside from whether or not you still abide by Grover Norquist's pledge?
Yeah, it's real simple. I don't think Washington, D.C. has a taxing problem. I think we have a spending problem. And what the pledge really says is, look, I want to reform the way Washington, D.C. spends money before I ask hardworking Americans to spend more of their tax dollars supporting an efficient government. Here are the facts. The president talks about raising taxes on millionaires, but really his taxes will affect people who make over $250,000 in their household. So let's focus on that group. If we took 100% of all the income from a household over 250 grand, so we didn't just raise their taxes at 30% or another 10%, we took 100% of it. If we took 100% of all income over 250 grand this year in our country, it would not equal this year's deficit. So the idea that somehow this is a taxing problem, or we need to just get the rich to pay more, or those who make over 250 grand to pay a little bit more and everything will be okay, is really devoid of the facts. And I would also say it's shirking the tough decisions of entitlement reform, of fixing Social Security and Medicare, of dealing with the great drivers of our country's debt. And I would say, as a member of Congress who gets briefed on the budget and where we're spending our money, to hear the president continually talk about tax increases, but not ever address Social Security or Medicare or lay out a budget, to me is an abdication of leadership, an abdication of responsibility, because he knows what I know, which is taxes are not going to solve this problem. It's only going to be by cutting spending and reforming our entitlement programs, and we need the president to lead on that issue.
So you, as an individual member of Congress, where do we cut?
Well, I supported $2 trillion in cuts as a part of the deficit, as a part of the debt limit vote that I took. It was the first time in our country's 200-year history that a debt limit was raised, which has been done over 100 times in our country's history, but this was the first time, this last August, where the debt limit was raised with offsetting cuts. So we raised the debt limit by $2 trillion, but authorized $2 trillion in cuts. That all comes out of the discretionary pot, however, which is only about 30% of spending, 35%. The other 65% is entitlement spending. That is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and some interest on the debt. In order for us to deal with that big piece of the puzzle, we've got to have some agreement by the Senate and the President to do entitlement reform. Now, the House has laid out what we want to do with Social Security and Medicare in the budget that we passed, the much talked about Paul Ryan budget, the House-passed budget. That budget did curb our costs. It laid out a path to balance our budget. That budget was bold. It was controversial, but it got more votes than any budget that's passed the Congress in the last 20 years. That's pretty telling. Under Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, no budget got the amount of support that this budget that passed the House this year. That tells you members of Congress want to do things that are bold. They want to fix this problem. The problem, though, H, is last week, during the State of the Union, that day marked the 1,000th day since the Senate was able to pass a budget. So it's been over 3 years since my counterparts in the Senate have been able to produce a budget, so it makes it very difficult to govern.
So you're not afraid to make changes in Social Security or Medicare?
We have to. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if anyone thinks that I got elected to Congress to take something away from someone, they got to be kidding themselves. It flies in the face of a good elected official. They don't want to take something away from their constituents. In fact, part of the reason we're in this problem is because elected officials have given too much from the public till that we don't have. But here's what I am going to do. I'm going to be honest. And the fact of the matter is, the average American citizen will pay in $60,000 into Medicare and receive $160,000 in benefit. That's not going to work for very long, and it's why the system is turning upside down. Social Security, it used to be when President Franklin Roosevelt designed the program, you had to be 60 years old to get the benefit. The average American life expectancy when he passed the bill was 58. So most people died before they got the benefit. Today, 67 to get full benefits. Most people live till they're 78. There used to be 15 people working, paying in for every one person drawing. Now there's 3 people paying in for every one person drawing. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out really quick, this system is flawed. We've got to make some changes now so that younger people in my generation and yet to come have time to plan for some different benefits that are going to have to happen, but we can do it without affecting current Social Security and Medicare recipients. That's very important for your viewers to realize, is that nobody's talking about making changes to current beneficiaries. People who are on Social Security, who are on Medicare, we want to protect their benefits, but to keep the programs around for the next generation of Americans, we're going to have to make some changes.
Let's look overseas for just a moment and talk about trade. Most notably, let's start with Caterpillar. Last week announced that they are now a $60 billion company, $60 billion in sales in 2011. A lot of that, more than half, due to international sales. Recently, the president signed the pacts with 3 different nations. What's next in the trade arena?
Great point. Caterpillar is doing very well. The other big economy in central Illinois is agriculture. Agriculture is directly tied to trade. We can't eat all the food that's grown in this country. And the Panama, Colombia, and South Korean trade agreements are huge new markets, new customers for our agricultural products as well as the manufactured products like Caterpillar. What's looking forward is the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade agreements, which are with all of the Asian countries that we have yet to get trading agreements with. For example, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. To get the Trans-Pacific Partnership passed, that would open up even more markets for Caterpillar and for the ag industry. So that's something that the Ways and Means Committee, on which I sit, is having hearings on, and the president has said he would like to get something done there, and I think we can work together to make it happen.
We do have a question from one of our viewers by way of Facebook. This comes from Jason Pemberton. As a younger congressman, and these are his words, as a younger congressman, I might point out you're the youngest congressman, I believe.
I am for now. We're all getting older.
As a younger congressman, how do you engage younger potential voters who are becoming more disenfranchised with government being out of touch with common people?
Great question. Well, I communicate with my younger people, my younger voters, the same way that he communicated with you, which is by Facebook. I use Facebook, Twitter, a very active YouTube page. It's important, if you're going to communicate with a generation or with a population of society, to use the means by which they get their information. Let's face it, if I get a front page story on my hometown newspaper, I'm not sure a whole lot of folks my age or even younger are getting daily subscriptions delivered to their apartment or their home of the daily newspaper. So if I want to reach my demographic or younger, I've got to be able to have an active Facebook, Twitter, YouTube page to get my information out. But what's different, H, about this generation is they're much more participatory. Rather than wanting to be talked to, they want to be listened to. And so what I find interesting about people that are even younger than I am, they want to give you a piece of their mind. They want to participate in government. They want to participate in the deliberative process on watching these bills become law. So they want to share their opinions and have a dialogue on Facebook or via Twitter. And so that's been an interesting thing to see, different based on the age of my constituents.
So what have you heard from them?
Well, I will tell you, visiting college campuses and communicating with the young people, there is nothing more important to them than getting a job. You know, some scary statistics, as of August of this summer, 80% of the college graduates that graduated in May were still living at home, looking for work.
80%?
80% of them. If you think about the fact that over 10% of our state here in Illinois is unemployed, over 8% of our country is unemployed, you'll know that if you have the opportunity to hire an employee, you're going to look for somebody who's very highly qualified and the best bang for your investment dollar. The challenge for young people who have limited experience but who have a fresh college degree is getting the open door and the open seat in order to get the opportunity to perform for a new employer. And so they're worried about the economy. Small individuals, young people, they're worried about the economy, about being able to get a job. They're also worried about the debt. That's more of kind of a long-term picture thing that they're like, hey, this is, who's going to pay that back? And
I'm not. I don't
Well,
have to worry about that, or at least, unless I live to 100.
You raise a good point because while I'm the youngest member of Congress, the average in the House is closer to 60, the average. And so most of the people that are making the decisions about the future of the country, about the kind of America that those young people are going to be living in, may not be around in 20 or 30 years to deal with the consequences of the mounting debt or of the entitlement programs that are going to blow up. So it is something that I think more and more young people are starting to pay attention to.
With regard to the image of Congress, you've seen all the reports about the poor image that you have with the public. What can you, as a lone person out of 435, do to improve the House of Representatives' image?
Well, I think there's two things. First, you combat the poor public image of Congress by doing a good job yourself. And so I think to the degree I come home every weekend to my district, stay engaged with my constituents, showing up, listening to them, doing my best to cast votes that represent their views, is job one for any congressman. And number two, when I go to Washington, D.C., how I act out there. Do I act in a professional manner? Am I respectful to my peers? Do I reach across the aisle and look for those bridges that I can cross with the president, with my Democratic colleagues? That's very important, I think, to improving the view of Congress, but more importantly, to getting things done. We live in a democracy. You can be a brilliant man or woman, you can have a brilliant idea, but if you're the only one that thinks it's brilliant, it's not going anywhere. And a leader without followers is just a man out for a walk. And so, if you want to get something done in Congress, you got to be able to build coalitions. You got to be able to convince people on both sides that you're right on an issue, and that's something else that I can do.
In the waning minutes that we have left, let's have a couple of 30-second responses and
Okay.
see if we can't get to a couple more topics here. What's the status of the transportation reauthorization bill?
The transportation bill will be voted on in February. I've been working behind the scenes on a 5-year bill that will use the motor fuel taxes that you all pay at the pump when you fill up your car, coupled with new offshore leases for offshore drilling as well as natural gas leasing rights, which will create jobs in the energy field, but also generate new revenue to the Motor Fuel Trust Fund. That bill will be voted on in the House, and I'm hopeful that the Senate will take it up and pass it. We need those construction jobs soon.
High-speed rail, generally speaking, is not part of that.
High-speed rail has never been a part of a highway bill per se. High-speed rail money got earmarked in the president's stimulus bill when he was first elected, and so there are some discussion about including some high-speed money in the motor fuel or in the highway bill. The problem, of course, is we don't have enough money right now to build the roads and bridges and traditional infrastructure. The question is, do we divert some of that money to rail?
And your personal opinion, I take it, is you're not in favor of spending?
Well, I think we need a very healthy rail system in our country. I've been a proponent of Amtrak and have voted against efforts to cut and defund Amtrak. I'm a supporter of public transportation. High speed, however, is a bit of an oxymoron in my view. I've traveled to a few foreign countries in my lifetime. You ride the TGV in France, you go over 200 miles an hour. You ride the LEV in China, you go over 200 miles an hour. I think that's what most Americans think of when they think of high speed. When they realize what the president is pushing here in our country is going to take the corridor between Chicago and St. Louis from 70 miles an hour to 90 miles an hour, I'm not sure that's really the high speed they're thinking of and worth the kind of investment that really won't get that many more people to park their cars and take the train. So it's not so much that I don't like high speed, it's that our population densities are not as great in this part of the country. High speed at 200 and 300 miles an hour makes more sense on the eastern coast where you've got cities like Boston and New York that are very close to one another.
A final thought on concealed carry. Illinois, right now that Wisconsin has passed concealed carry, Illinois is the lone state that does not have that. There's a measure in Congress that says that if you have a concealed carry permit in, name a state, that is a valid permit for any other state, including Illinois. Is that a good idea to have the federal government dictating to the state of Illinois?
Well, the federal government has the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And the federal government says to Illinois and Indiana and Minnesota and Hawaii, we have the right to free speech. And each state does not have the right to infringe upon that free speech. Second Amendment says we have a right to bear arms, and no state is allowed to infringe on that right to bear arms. So I think much to the same that there's reciprocity on your driver's license, and once you have a driver's license, you can drive to any state in the country. If you have a license to bear arms given by one state, given that you have the right to bear arms in the U.S. Constitution, it makes sense to me there ought to be reciprocity in that as well.
And with that, I am sorry, Congressman, I've got more questions. Stick around, you and I can talk.
Please, be happy
but
to.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to move on in terms of on air. We thank Congressman Aaron Schock, Republican from Peoria, for sharing time with us.
Thanks, H. Good to be with you.
And we'll be back next week with another edition of At Issue when we're going to be talking about bullying. What programs exist in Central Illinois to stop the bullying in schools and elsewhere? Join us next time on At Issue.